The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you.
The Pharisees went off and plotted how they might entrap Jesus in speech. They sent their disciples to him with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man, and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth, and you are not concerned with anyone's opinion, for you do not regard a person's status. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not?" Knowing their malice, Jesus said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin that pays the census tax." Then they handed him the Roman coin. He said to them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" They replied, "Caesar's." At that he said to them, "Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." The Gospel of the Lord. So, friends, this past week you might have heard that there was a little bit of a tragedy in our diocese. We had a priest of our diocese stationed out in Marion who passed away last weekend due to an accidental discharge of a firearm. He was 41 years old. He had been a priest for 13 years. So those of you who hadn't heard, now you know, and I want to thank all of you who offered condolences and prayers to me. It has been kind of a challenging week for a lot of us priests. I knew Father Roberts very well, actually. He was in my group of friends. I saw him pretty much every week. So yeah, it's been kind of tough, and I appreciate your prayers. I wanted to talk about it a little bit today. I think over these past few months with our pandemic, I think this is just another example of the reality of the mortality of our lives. Our lives aren't going to last forever. And one of the things I thought about with Father Roberts was, what if that had happened to me? You know, he's roughly the same age as I am. What if that happened to me? Would I be ready? Would I be ready to go meet God? In a certain sense, I feel a little bit of consolation with Father Roberts. He was very much a man of the cross. I know that he did a lot of fasting and penance and prayer for his people. I know that he had some challenging assignments. He had some health issues. He actually got cancer at one point, one of his assignments. One of the things I think is really tremendous about him was his fidelity in pursuing conversions of people. He had this really good friend who is an Anglican priest for his whole adult life and is basically on the verge of dying right now. He's pretty much blind and practically deaf. And for many years, Father Roberts had been speaking to him about becoming Catholic, coming back to the one true church. And sure enough, about a month ago, he was able to bring him into the Catholic Church. It was just amazing. This man who had been an Anglican priest his whole adult life is going to die as a Catholic priest. It's beautiful, wonderful. So Father Roberts, in a sense, he completed his most important task in that way. But I wanted to talk about this a little bit. What happens when tragedies happen in our lives? We all know, we've all experienced certain tragedies. Again, are we ready? Would we be ready if death came for us today or tomorrow? Wanted to share a beautiful story of one of my favorite saints, and so I'm going to ask the Knights of the Holy Temple to grab those pictures. Not sure if you all have heard of this young lady. You guys can stand up here in front so people can see you. Does anybody know who this is? So let's have Walker. Why don't you stand over here in this corner, and you can stand over there. All right, and James and Carson. All right, they can stand right here. All right, so you want to point that picture out so people can see, even people in the overflow. All right, so anybody ever seen this young girl before? Anybody know who she is? Her name is Blessed Kiara Bedano, and she is one of the first saints to be canonized from Generation X. Any Generation X people in here? All right, a few Generation X people. She died in 1990, which is a great year for the world and for the church. Anybody know what happened in 1990? That was the year that yours truly was born, brought into the world. 1990. So great year for the church, for the world. Blessed Kiara, so she died when she was 19, and she's now a blessed. I love her story. Walker, if you can keep pointing that picture out there so people can see her. I love her story, first of all, because, just look at her. I think sometimes when we think about saints, we think about people who are from ages long past, or people who are unlike us. They're more pious than we are. They're more spiritual than we are. And see the picture of Blessed Kiara, and she looks like she could come right out of Crawfordsville High School, right? Saints don't look different from us. They look like us, and they have the same experience as we do. Blessed Kiara was no different. In her childhood, she was just like most young people. She loved to play sports. She loved to spend time with her friends. Oftentimes, she would get into some arguments with her parents. She was an only child, and so sometimes there were some struggles with that. And she loved to play sports. She played tennis. And she was also a pretty devout young girl. Think about some of our high school students who are very involved in our youth ministry. They kind of remind me of Blessed Kiara. They just have this natural sense and love for Jesus and for God. And Blessed Kiara, one day when she was playing tennis, she was 16 years old, and all of a sudden she felt this terrible pain in her shoulder, and she dropped the tennis racket. And she was never able to play tennis again. They took her to the hospital, and they found out that she had a very rare form of bone cancer, a very painful disease. And so, like any great person, when she found this out, she was decided she was going to fight it with everything she had. And that's exactly what she did. And for about a year, they tried all sorts of different treatments. And after about a year, they realized that the treatments just weren't really working. And so she made this beautiful decision. She made this prayer to God, and she said, Jesus, if this is what you want, then this is what I want too. And she decided that in the rest of her short life, she was going to completely offer it to God. And that's what she did. In the hospital where she was staying, there was a bunch of other young people, a lot of people who struggled with depression and things like that. And she was a minister to them. She would go on walks with them through all the hallways, even though it caused her a lot of pain just to walk. And her parents would say, Kiara, you got to stop doing this. And she said, well, I can rest soon. I can rest when I die. Right? People would come and visit her, and they wanted to come and cheer her up. And they found that rather she was cheering them up. They called her Luce, which means light in Italian. She was in Italy. At a certain point in her illness, her hair started to fall out. So, this beautiful young girl, beautiful hair, her hair started to fall out. And instead of being depressed and sad, every time her hair would fall out, she would lift it up to God. And she would say, I offer this to you, Jesus. During the last few months of her life, they offered her morphine, and she refused to take any morphine. And she said the reason why is because she didn't want to lose her reason. She said that now at this point in my life, all I have left is to offer my heart and my soul to God. And I don't want that to be clouded by morphine. One of the last couple things she did in her life is she prepared her parents for her death. So one of the things she did is she wrote a great little Christmas card to her parents, and she hid it in their home so that they would open it after she had passed away. Her last desire, her last wish, her dying wish, was that she would be buried in a wedding dress. She told her parents she wanted to be buried in a wedding dress because the day of her death would be her wedding with God. So she wanted to be buried in a wedding dress. Her last words just before she died to her mother was, Mom, be happy because I am happy. She knew that she was going to God. It's a beautiful story, right? Just amazing. It shows us how beautiful our lives can be if we give them to God, even in the midst of terrible tragedies, even in the midst of terrible suffering and heartache. We as Christians can still make it something beautiful and a gift to the world. It's amazing. And so I think about that in the midst of the death of my dear friend, Father Robert. And I think about all of us, and especially in the midst of this pandemic, when a lot of us have different anxieties and concerns about our physical health. It's really important that we remember, as Catholics, we don't believe our goal is to live as long as we can. It's to live as well as we can with the time that we have. And each of us should be striving each day to prepare ourselves more for when that day comes, when God will call us. Will we be ready for that? Are we ready for that? Thank you, gentlemen.